Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into the shadowy streets of Palermo in 1994, where the air hums with tension and secrets thick as the Mediterranean night. Imagine yourself walking down a narrow alley, the distant echo of footsteps fading, the faint scent of salt and smoke swirling in the air. You probably won't survive this journey without at least a few shivers creeping up your spine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where we're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Giuseppe Graviano trudges through Palermo's labyrinth of secrets, a city gripped in the iron fist of Cosa Nostra. The son of a family already entangled in the web of Sicily's underworld, Giuseppe's earliest years are steeped in an atmosphere thick with unspoken rules and silent codes. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That formative moment when ambition took root and the path toward infamy began. The Graviano brothers, Giuseppe, Filippo, and others, forge an alliance marked not by loud violence, but by a cold, calculated silence. Unlike the brash bloodshed that often defines gangster lore, Giuseppe earns the moniker the businessman of silent bombs for his preference for strategy over spectacle. Many people still think that the true power in Cosa Nostra lies in the gun. But what about the bomb? Quiet, deadly, and delivering messages without a sound. So what do you think? By 1994, Palermo is a city caught between tradition and terror. The mafia's grip stretches into politics, commerce, and daily life, the shadows lengthening with every clandestine deal. Giuseppe's role is to navigate these treacherous waters, balancing ruthless ambition with the need for discretion. His early ventures blend legitimate business fronts with darker enterprises, a double life that few outsiders fully understand. Historical fact. The early 1990s in Sicily saw a surge of mafia bombings, a brutal campaign aimed at intimidating the state and its defenders. Giuseppe's name is woven through this tapestry of fear, a puppeteer behind some of the most devastating attacks. From the quiet corners of Palermo's streets to the whispered meetings behind closed doors, Giuseppe builds a network as intricate as a spider's web. His power is not just in muscle, but in influence, political favors, financial manipulation, and a chilling silence that speaks louder than any gunshot. This is a tale of shadows and whispers, of a man who mastered the art of silence in a world that screams violence. So lean back, let your mind drift, and follow the footsteps of Giuseppe Graviano, the businessman whose bombs spoke volumes without a sound. Palermo, the city itself, holds stories like the worn pages of an old book, torn at the edges, but impossible to put down. Streets twist and turn with narrow alleys that have seen centuries of secrets whispered under the breath. The Mediterranean sun bakes stone walls by day, but by night, the city breathes a different air, one heavy with unease and the muffled sounds of quiet negotiations. Giuseppe was born into this city in the early 1960s, a time when the Sicilian mafia's influence was shifting from rural control to urban dominance. His family, the Gravianos, were no strangers to power. His father and uncles had long been enmeshed in the Cosa Nostra, the secretive and deadly society that ruled the island's underworld with invisible hands. Growing up, Giuseppe learned the unspoken language of respect and fear, lessons taught not in classrooms, but in the silent nods and sideways glances of Palermo's neighborhoods. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? It was not a flashy departure. No dramatic car chase or gunfire. Just a quiet exit from the family home, a pocket full of cash, and a mind set on business rather than brute force. The Graviano brothers shared a bond tighter than blood. Filippo, Giuseppe's older brother, was a figure of quiet menace, calm, calculated, the kind of man whose smile rarely reached his eyes. Together, they plotted a course that would lead them into the heart of Cosa Nostra's evolving strategy. Less about overt violence, more about influence, infiltration, and, yes, silent bombs. The 1980s and early 1990s were a turbulent time for the Sicilian mafia. The Maxi trial of the mid-80s had sent shockwaves through their ranks, with dozens of members convicted thanks to the courageous testimony of informants. This left a vacuum of power and an urge to retaliate, not just against rivals, but against the very institutions trying to dismantle them. In response, the Gravianos and their allies orchestrated a brutal bombing campaign, striking cultural landmarks, government buildings, and symbols of authority. These attacks were not just acts of terror, but carefully calibrated messages, silent bombs that spoke volumes. Giuseppe, ever the businessman, was the strategist behind many of these operations, ensuring that the chaos served his family's long-term goals. Many people still think that Cosa Nostra's violence was a straightforward fight for territory and money, but Giuseppe's approach was more nuanced, a chess game rather than a street brawl. So what do you think? In this dangerous game, silence was a weapon just as deadly as a gun. Communication was encrypted in gestures, coded phrases, and the calculated timing of explosions. The Graviano brothers mastered this art of invisibility, leaving no trail and striking fear deep into the hearts of their enemies and law enforcement alike. Historical fact. The infamous 1992 bombing that killed anti-mafia magistrate Giovanni Falcone was a turning point, shaking the nation and forcing the government to double down on its crackdown. While Giuseppe was not officially charged in that attack, his network's fingerprints were all over the planning stages. The city reacted with a mixture of fear, outrage, and resolve. Palermo's citizens were caught between the brutality of the mafia and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. Giuseppe's world operated in this murky space, where power was wielded in shadows and silence often meant survival. Through it all, Giuseppe cultivated a public image far removed from his underground dealings. A businessman on the surface, a patron of local events, someone who could shake hands with politicians and appear unremarkable. This duality was crucial. To survive and thrive, the businessman had to keep the bombs silent and the whispers louder. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? It was that quiet moment that marked the beginning of a lifetime spent balancing two worlds, one of shadowy violence and one of surface respectability. Palermo's streets still bear the scars of those times, but the legacy of Giuseppe Graviano is more than just destruction. It's a lesson in how power can be wielded with subtlety, how silence can scream louder than a gunshot, and how one man's ambition can shape an entire city's fate. As you listen, imagine the slow ticking of a clock in a dimly lit room, the faint smell of old leather and cigar smoke, the kind of room where deals are made without words, and where Giuseppe Graviano quietly pulls the strings. Many people still think that the mafia is simply a relic of the past, or that it's all about loud, brash violence. But Giuseppe's story tells a different tale, one of patience, strategy, and silent bombs. So what do you think? Lean back, let your thoughts drift, and prepare to follow this businessman into the depths of Palermo's darkest nights. Giuseppe Graviano's world is not one built on loud declarations or violent bravado, but on quiet precision, careful strategy, and the unbreakable bonds of family loyalty. As Palermo's winding streets continue to echo with the distant reverberations of the recent bombings, Giuseppe and his brothers move deliberately, consolidating power with a calm that unnerves even the most seasoned of their rivals. This isn't the kind of story where gunshots are the headline. Instead, it's about whispered deals in dimly lit rooms, subtle nods that shift the balance of entire neighborhoods, and bombs that speak without making a sound. If you've ever strolled through Palermo's old quarters on a soft spring evening, you might have noticed the contrast. Joyful chatter in cafes shadowed by centuries-old balconies, children chasing each other between stone archways. And yet, beneath this lively surface, a tension as thick as the Mediterranean heat. This tension is Palermo's invisible heartbeat, one that pulses with secrets and silent agreements, the kind that make the city's beauty both mesmerizing and dangerous. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment wasn't marked by fireworks or fanfare. It was a quiet parting from a world he once knew, the safe confines of family dinners, simple street games, and youthful hopes. Instead, it was a step into a labyrinth of power plays where every misstep could mean death or disgrace. Giuseppe wasn't alone in this journey. His older brother, Filippo, stood beside him, a figure of both menace and calm. While Filippo might have carried the aura of the enforcer, the kind of man whose silence could freeze a room, Giuseppe was the thinker, the planner, the businessman. Together, they made a dangerous combination: muscle backed by mind, raw power tempered by cold calculation. Palermo in the early 1990s was a city teetering on the edge. The Maxi trial had rattled the foundations of Cosa Nostra, sending a shockwave of convictions through its ranks. But far from crumbling, the mafia adapted. It turned more insidious, embedding itself deeper into the veins of Sicilian society. The Graviano brothers saw opportunity in this chaos. Historical fact: the Maxi trial, 1986-1992, was the largest anti-mafia prosecution in history, convicting hundreds of mafiosi and dealing a severe blow to Cosa Nostra's open operations. However, it also pushed many members to evolve, becoming more secretive and sophisticated. Giuseppe's rise coincides with this pivotal transformation. He understood that brute force alone would no longer secure power. The new battlefield was influence. In the halls of politics, the corridors of business, even within the very courts meant to bring criminals to justice. His bombs were silent, not just in their sound, but in the message. Terror without spectacle, a warning cloaked in shadows. Many people still think that the mafia's strength comes from brazen acts of violence, gunfights in the streets, or loud showdowns. But Giuseppe's story challenges that notion. The true power was in the quiet, in the unseen moves that toppled enemies without firing a single shot. So what do you think? The Graviano brothers were masters of this subtle game. While their rivals sought to dominate by force, they built alliances, negotiated loyalties, and constructed facades of legitimacy. Giuseppe's business dealings included everything from construction contracts to investments in local enterprises. To the public, he was just another businessman, albeit one with a knack for timing and influence. To those in the know, he was a puppeteer, controlling strings that stretched far beyond Palermo's cobblestones. Palermo's neighborhoods reflected these complex dynamics. On one hand, the local people endured hardships, aware but often powerless against the mafia's omnipresence. On the other, a few brave souls fought back. Judges like Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who sought to pierce the veil of silence. Their assassinations in 1992 marked a brutal escalation in the mafia's campaign of terror, underscoring the deadly stakes involved. Giuseppe's role in this dark chapter was significant. While the spotlight often fell on the violent acts themselves, the planning, funding, and strategic direction were the handiwork of men like him, calm, calculating, and always several steps ahead. Communication within Cosa Nostra under Giuseppe's watch was an art. Conversations avoided incriminating words. Messages were passed through trusted couriers or concealed in everyday objects. This network was designed to be airtight. Bombings, while devastating, were executed with such precision that authorities often found themselves chasing shadows. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That first step wasn't just a personal milestone. It was the beginning of a lifelong commitment to secrecy, loyalty, and survival in a world where one wrong word could unravel everything. The Graviano brothers' influence extended beyond Sicily. Their reach into mainland Italy, and even overseas, was facilitated by connections in politics, law enforcement, and business. Money flowed through layers of legitimate enterprises, disguising the source and destination with practiced ease. Palermo's social fabric strained under the weight of this double life. Ordinary citizens faced daily choices: comply, resist, or retreat into silence. The mafia's power was reinforced not just by fear, but by a pervasive sense of inevitability. Giuseppe's personal demeanor was a study in contrasts. To acquaintances, he projected warmth and reliability. To allies, a loyal brother and shrewd strategist. To enemies, a ghost, silent, unyielding, and impossible to pin down. Historical fact. In 1993, a series of bombings targeted Italy's cultural heritage, including attacks in Rome and Florence. These acts were widely attributed to Cosa Nostra factions aiming to destabilize the Italian government. Giuseppe's fingerprints were found in the orchestration of these campaigns, although he maintained an air of plausible deniability. It was the hallmark of his approach. Let the violence speak, but never the man behind it. Many people still think that figures like Giuseppe are reckless brutes, but the truth reveals a man who wields silence like a scalpel, precise, effective, and devastating. So what do you think? As you listen, picture the dim light filtering through lace curtains in a Palermo apartment, the faint scent of tobacco lingering in the air. Conversations happen in murmurs, plans hatched in shadows. This is the world Giuseppe calls home. The Graviano brothers' story is not just about bombs or crime. It's about the slow unraveling of old power structures and the emergence of a new, more insidious order. It's about how one family used silence and strategy to outmaneuver enemies and law enforcement alike. Lean back now. Let your mind wander through the winding alleys of Palermo. Feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the stories whispered beneath your breath. Follow the quiet footsteps of Giuseppe Graviano, a businessman in a world ruled by silent bombs. The maze of Palermo's backstreets isn't just a physical place. It's a metaphor for the labyrinthine world Giuseppe Graviano inhabits. Here, every corner hides secrets, every shadow whispers caution. It's a world where the language is unspoken, where respect is earned through silence and the subtlest gestures. In this space, Giuseppe moves like a ghost, carefully calibrating each step, knowing that one wrong move could unravel everything. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment wasn't just about ambition. It was about learning to read the unspoken rules of a dangerous game. Giuseppe's early years in the mafia were less about violence and more about understanding the intricate dance of power, loyalty, and deception. Unlike many who enter the underworld fueled by brute force or fiery temperaments, Giuseppe's strength lies in his patience and strategic mind. The rules of Cosa Nostra are not written, but lived, an evolving code that demands discretion, obedience, and above all, silence. Breaking these rules isn't just frowned upon, it's punishable by death, historical fact. The Cosa Nostra's code of silence, or omertà, is a foundational principle that forbids cooperation with authorities and encourages loyalty above all else. This code has been both a shield and a weapon for the mafia for centuries. Giuseppe's mastery of this code sets him apart. He understands that silence is not weakness, but power. In a world where loud gunfire might draw attention, a well-placed whisper or an unseen bomb can shift the balance far more effectively. The Graviano brothers are particularly adept at this subtle form of control. Where others might assert dominance through overt displays, they prefer to influence through quiet negotiation and calculated pressure. This approach extends beyond Palermo, shaping relationships with politicians, businessmen, and even law enforcement officers who can be swayed or intimidated. Many people still think that the mafia's influence is exercised through fear alone, but the Gravianos demonstrate that manipulation, control, and influence are just as critical. So what do you think? Giuseppe's early ventures into the underworld are marked by his ability to blend legitimate business with illicit activities. Construction projects, import-export companies, and other front businesses offer a veneer of respectability, while beneath the surface, money laundering and racketeering flourish. Palermo's economy, especially during the early 1990s, is intertwined with these shadow enterprises. Local jobs, contracts, and services are often controlled or influenced by mafia networks, creating a dependency that binds communities in complex ways. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That first step was not only a personal rite of passage, but the beginning of a lifelong balancing act, maintaining a facade of legitimacy while orchestrating a criminal empire. Communication remains key in this delicate balancing act. Giuseppe and his associates rely on codes, messengers, and subtle signals to coordinate their operations. Bombings and violent acts are meticulously planned to avoid detection, often coordinated through layers of intermediaries. Historical fact: the 1992 assassination of Judge Giovanni Falcone, orchestrated by the mafia, marked a grim escalation in their tactics. Though Giuseppe was not publicly linked to the bombing itself, his role within the network suggests a close involvement in the planning and logistics. Palermo's citizens live in a state of uneasy acceptance. The mafia's presence is both an unspoken reality and a subject of whispered defiance. Giuseppe's world is both feared and respected, a paradox that shapes daily life. Many people still think that power in the mafia is straightforward: guns, violence, and intimidation. Giuseppe's story reveals a far more intricate web of influence and control. So what do you think? Imagine now the soft murmur of a crowded cafe where deals are made over espresso and cigarettes. Here, beneath the laughter and casual conversation, alliances are forged and destinies decided. Giuseppe thrives in this environment, reading between the lines and using silence as his weapon. His reputation grows not through public notoriety, but through whispered respect and quiet fear. The businessman of silent bombs is a man who commands power without raising his voice. As you settle deeper into this story, picture the slow unfolding of a chess match played in the shadows, with Giuseppe making moves that will echo through Palermo's history. Lean back, relax, and follow the calculated footsteps of a man who learned that sometimes the loudest noise is made by silence. To truly grasp the magnitude of Giuseppe Graviano's early years within Cosa Nostra, one must appreciate the environment that shaped him. A place where tradition meets brutality and where silence often speaks louder than words. Palermo's winding alleys and sun-baked courtyards harbor more than just history. They conceal a network of loyalties and betrayals as old as the stones themselves. From a young age, Giuseppe was schooled not in the art of loud confrontation, but in subtle influence. His education came through observation, watching how the older generation communicated through silence, how a raised eyebrow or a quiet nod could shift allegiances overnight. He learned the value of patience, the power of waiting for the right moment to strike or negotiate. The Graviano family, already deeply rooted in the mafia's hierarchy, provided a solid foundation. But family ties in this world are double-edged. Loyalty is paramount, yet suspicion lingers beneath every handshake. Giuseppe understood early on that survival depended on both trust and wariness. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That day wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a baptism into a life where every action carried weight and every silence could be deadly. The brothers' ascent was marked by their unique blend of business savvy and ruthlessness. Giuseppe's approach was to extend influence quietly, weaving himself into the fabric of legitimate enterprises. This dual identity made him elusive, a shadow figure who could navigate both the corridors of power and the dark back streets. Historical fact: during the early 1990s, Cosa Nostra's infiltration of legitimate industries, particularly construction and waste management, became a significant source of revenue and influence, with families like the Gravianos leading the way. By cloaking criminal operations beneath layers of business deals and legal fronts, Giuseppe created a buffer against law enforcement scrutiny. This approach forced the authorities to chase ghosts, as tangible evidence was scarce and witnesses scarce or silent. Many people still think that mafia bosses flaunt their power with flashy displays and open violence. Giuseppe's story reveals a different reality, one where silence and invisibility are weapons of choice. So what do you think? The bombings orchestrated during this period were both a tactic of intimidation and a strategic tool. They sent messages not just to the state, but to rival factions within the mafia itself. Giuseppe's role was to ensure these actions aligned with broader family goals, avoiding unnecessary attention while maximizing impact. In these moments, the delicate balance between violence and diplomacy was on full display. A misstep could ignite internecine warfare or bring devastating crackdowns from law enforcement. Giuseppe's calm, calculating nature was crucial in steering his clan through this perilous time. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial act of stepping into the dangerous interplay of power and secrecy set the tone for decades to come. Palermo's citizens lived with the constant tension of a city under siege by invisible forces. Yet amidst this, life went on. Children played in narrow alleys, markets bustled with vendors, and the scent of fresh bread mingled with the salty sea breeze. Giuseppe's world was one of contrasts. Publicly, he was a businessman, a neighbor, a figure of normalcy. Privately, he was a strategist, weaving a web of influence and fear that stretched far beyond Sicily. Historical fact: the 1993 bombings of Rome's cultural sites were part of a calculated effort by Cosa Nostra to destabilize the Italian government, reflecting the mafia's shift to more indirect, symbolic acts of terror. While Giuseppe never sought the spotlight, his fingerprints were all over the plans that executed these attacks. His preference for silent but deadly tactics earned him respect and fear in equal measure. Many people still think of mafia violence as chaotic and reckless, yet Giuseppe's methods reveal a cold, precise orchestration. So what do you think? As you listen, picture a dimly lit room where maps are spread across a table, phone lines buzz quietly, and men speak in coded phrases. This is the nerve center of a criminal empire run not by brute force, but by intellect and patience. The Graviano brothers' rise wasn't just a family story. It was a chapter in Palermo's ongoing struggle between light and shadow, order and chaos. Lean back. Let your mind wander through the labyrinth of alliances and betrayals. Feel the weight of silence, the tension of unspoken threats, and follow the path carved by a man who understood that power often comes quietly. Giuseppe Graviano's ascent from a quiet observer to a key player in Palermo's underworld was not a sudden leap, but a calculated climb. It is in this section of his journey that the notion of the silent businessman takes on its full meaning. Rather than brandishing weapons or issuing threats, Giuseppe's power was wielded through influence, shaping events from behind the scenes, making deals in the dim light of private offices, and orchestrating operations that left no immediate trace. Palermo in the early 1990s was a city cloaked in contradictions. At street level, life pulsed with everyday vigor. Children played in piazzas, markets overflowed with fresh produce, and the aroma of espresso and baked goods filled the air. Yet beneath this lively surface lay a grim reality, one where the mafia's grip was both pervasive and insidious. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial moment was not just a personal rite of passage, but a symbolic turning point, marking Giuseppe's commitment to the unspoken rules that governed his world. It was a promise to operate within the shadows, where silence was a currency more valuable than gold. Giuseppe's early forays into the business side of Cosa Nostra were marked by a clever blend of legitimacy and criminal enterprise. Construction contracts, waste management, and import-export businesses served as facades, concealing a complex network of illicit activity beneath a veneer of respectability. Historical fact: during this period, mafia families heavily infiltrated Sicily's construction industry, leveraging contracts and kickbacks to expand their influence and launder money. This dual existence required not only cunning, but also patience and discretion. Giuseppe mastered the art of appearing unremarkable, a businessman concerned with balance sheets rather than gunfights, while simultaneously steering operations that challenged the very foundations of the Italian state. Many people still think that mafia bosses flaunt their power through violence and intimidation alone. Giuseppe's story shows us the power of subtlety, where the quiet pull of money and influence can shape destinies as much as any gun. So what do you think? The Graviano brothers' business acumen extended to forging alliances beyond Sicily's shores. Through a network of contacts, they established links with politicians, businessmen, and even corrupt officials who could facilitate or protect their operations. These relationships were carefully cultivated, often maintained through unspoken agreements and mutual benefits, rather than overt demands. Palermo's citizens often found themselves caught in this web of power. For some, the mafia was a source of protection or employment. For others, it was a shadow they dared not acknowledge aloud. This ambiguity, helped the Gravianos maintain their dominance while avoiding direct confrontation. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That first step was the beginning of navigating this complex social landscape, a dance where one misstep could mean disaster. Behind closed doors, Giuseppe operated with the precision of a chess master. He understood the importance of timing, the need to weigh risks against rewards carefully. Bombings and violent acts were not spontaneous outbursts, but strategic moves designed to send clear messages to enemies and authorities alike. Historical fact: the 1993 bombing of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence was part of a mafia campaign to pressure the Italian government, reflecting a shift towards symbolic targets. While Giuseppe's involvement in such events was covert, his role in coordinating and financing these operations was significant. His preference for silent, indirect tactics earned him respect within the mafia and made him a difficult target for law enforcement. Many people still think that mafia violence is chaotic and reckless. Giuseppe's methods reveal a disciplined, calculated approach to wielding terror. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the quiet tension of a room where maps are spread, phone lines buzz softly, and plans are whispered in hushed tones. This is the realm where Giuseppe's true power lies, not in the noise of gunfire, but in the silence of anticipation. The Graviano brothers' rise encapsulates a transformation in Cosa Nostra's operations, from overt displays of force to a more sophisticated, business-like approach to crime. It's a story of adaptation, survival, and the relentless pursuit of power. Lean back, relax, and let your mind drift through the alleys of Palermo, following the footsteps of a man who mastered the art of silent dominance. The city of Palermo breathes under a veil of tension, the palpable weight of fear hanging over its cobbled streets like a low-hanging cloud. Giuseppe Graviano moves through this charged atmosphere with the poise of a man who understands the intricate dance between power and perception. His influence in the early 1990s is no secret to those who know where to look. Yet to the casual observer, he remains just another businessman, blending seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet moment of departure was the genesis of a journey into a world where silence was the currency and invisibility the greatest armor. The early 1990s in Palermo were a maelstrom of violence, politics, and shifting alliances. The mafia, battered but not broken by the Maxi trial and the arrest of key figures, was adapting, evolving into a form that was less about brash dominance and more about subtle, pervasive control. Giuseppe and his brothers were at the forefront of this transformation. Historical fact: the period following the Maxi trial saw a resurgence of mafia activity marked by an increase in bombings and assassinations, especially targeting Italian state figures and cultural landmarks in an effort to intimidate and destabilize. Giuseppe's role was pivotal. He was not the loud voice shouting orders, but the quiet hand guiding the pieces on a sprawling chessboard. The bombings that rocked Palermo and other Italian cities during this time were both strategic and symbolic, aimed at sending clear warnings without drawing unnecessary attention to the perpetrators. The Graviano brothers had perfected the art of silent intimidation. Bombs were deployed with precision, detonating in moments designed to maximize terror, yet avoid civilian casualties when possible. A grim calculus that underscored their cold pragmatism. Many people still think that mafia violence is indiscriminate chaos. Giuseppe's careful orchestration reveals a chilling order beneath the surface. So what do you think? In tandem with the violence was a relentless expansion of legitimate business interests. Construction, waste disposal, public contracts. These sectors became fertile ground for laundering money and entrenching power. Giuseppe's ability to straddle the line between legality and crime allowed him to wield influence in boardrooms as effectively as he did in shadowed alleys. Palermo's political landscape was not immune to these machinations. Corruption seeped into municipal offices, with elected officials either turning a blind eye or actively collaborating with the mafia. Giuseppe's network of contacts was extensive, providing a protective shield for his operations. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment marked the start of a lifetime spent navigating this labyrinth of influence, fear, and ambition. The social fabric of Palermo was strained. Ordinary citizens found themselves living in a city where the mafia's presence was as much a fact of life as the sea breeze. Some accepted this reality, others resisted quietly, but most remained caught in a web of survival and silence. Historical fact: the anti-mafia movement gained significant traction during this period, fueled by the sacrifices of judges, journalists, and activists who risked everything to expose the syndicate's reach. Giuseppe's approach was to undermine these efforts subtly, using his business connections to sow doubt, spread misinformation, and maintain the illusion of normalcy. Many people still think of mafia bosses as mere criminals. Giuseppe's story, however, is one of a shrewd strategist and businessman whose actions shaped the course of Italian history. So what do you think? Imagine now the slow turning of a key in a lock, the rustle of paper contracts signed under dim light, the murmur of negotiations that decide the fate of cities. This is Giuseppe's realm, a world where power is wielded silently but decisively. The Graviano brothers' dominance during this period is a testament to their adaptability and cold calculation. It's a saga of shadows cast long over Palermo's past and future. Lean back, let the city's whispers wash over you, and follow the silent footsteps of the man known as the businessman of silent bombs. The faint hum of Palermo's restless nights carries more than the usual whispers of gossip and distant church bells. It carries the weight of an unseen war, one fought not with armies, but with shadows, whispers, and the calculated crackle of explosions that speak without words. Giuseppe Graviano, known in some circles as the businessman of silent bombs, has solidified his role as a master strategist in this clandestine conflict. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet moment marked the beginning of a relentless journey, where each decision ripples through the city's veins like an invisible current. The early 1990s mafia bombing campaign was a brutal crescendo in the ongoing battle between Cosa Nostra and the Italian state. Giuseppe's fingerprints, though never publicly confirmed, are believed to be deeply embedded in the orchestration of these attacks. Far from mindless acts of terror, these bombings were precise messages, warnings aimed at crippling the institutions that threatened the mafia's grip on power. Historical fact: the bombing of Via Palestro in Milan, which killed 5 people and injured dozens, was part of this violent campaign, signaling the mafia's reach beyond Sicily. Giuseppe's role went beyond financing and planning. He was a master of timing and discretion. Each bomb was placed to send the loudest message with the least noise about who was behind it. The silence after the blast was often more terrifying than the explosion itself. The Graviano brothers operated in a realm where silence was power and presence was felt without being seen. They moved with deliberate calm, weaving a network of influence that spread through business, politics, and crime alike. Many people still think mafia violence is chaotic and spontaneous. Giuseppe's orchestration reveals a symphony of cold, calculated moves. So what do you think? Palermo's residents lived in a delicate balance, caught between the fear of violence and the entanglement with a system that offered both protection and oppression. For many, the mafia was a shadow overlord, omnipresent yet unseen, demanding loyalty through silence. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That day marked not only the start of Giuseppe's criminal career, but also his deep immersion into this complex social web. Behind the scenes, Giuseppe maintained a facade of respectability. Publicly, he was a businessman, a figure who attended community events, fostered local relationships, and appeared to abide by societal norms. Privately, he masterminded operations that destabilized the very fabric of Italian law and order. Historical fact: the 1993 bombing campaigns were part of a larger mafia strategy to intimidate the Italian government following the Maxi trial verdicts. Despite the brutality, these attacks were calculated, intended to provoke a response that the mafia could manipulate to their advantage. Giuseppe's understanding of this balance between violence and politics set him apart as a leader. Many people still think of mafia bosses as reckless thugs. Giuseppe's methods show a man deeply strategic and patient. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the heavy silence after a distant explosion, the weight of tension hanging thick in the air, and the slow, deliberate movements of men who never need to raise their voices to command attention. The Graviano brothers' silent campaign was not just about destruction. It was about reshaping Palermo's power structures and sending a clear message. The mafia remained a force to be reckoned with, quiet but deadly. Lean back, breathe deeply, and follow the invisible trails left by a man who mastered the deadly art of silence. The morning after the Via Palestro bombing, Palermo wakes under a sky heavy with smoke and fear. Streets that just hours before hummed with everyday life now feel hollow, the echoes of the explosion still vibrating through stone walls and shaken hearts. Giuseppe Graviano remains a shadow behind the scenes, the silent hand guiding this orchestration of chaos and control. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet step forward was the seed from which this violent storm would grow. A storm that Giuseppe and his brothers harnessed with cold precision. The bombing was not just an act of terror, but a meticulously planned message, aimed at striking fear into the institutions of the state and anyone who dared oppose the mafia's authority. While Giuseppe's name was never officially linked, insiders say he was deeply involved in the planning, financing, and execution of the campaign. Historical fact: the Via Palestro bombing, which targeted a cultural institution in Milan in 1993, was one of several coordinated attacks designed to challenge the Italian government's anti-mafia initiatives. The Graviano brothers understood the psychological impact of their actions. It wasn't enough to win through violence alone. They had to send silent warnings that reverberated through the corridors of power and the streets alike. Their bombs spoke volumes without shouting, a terrifying quiet after the roar. Many people still think the mafia's violence is indiscriminate and reckless. Giuseppe's involvement reveals a calculated, strategic use of terror designed to serve broader objectives. So what do you think? Behind the scenes, the city's officials scrambled to respond, caught between outrage and fear. The bombing campaign was a dark turning point, forcing Palermo and the wider Italian state to confront the brutal reality of the mafia's reach and resolve. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment was the first step in a career marked by such chilling episodes, moments where silence and violence combined to shape history. Yet, amid the chaos, Giuseppe maintained his outward persona, a businessman, a figure who could attend meetings, broker deals, and navigate the murky waters of legitimate commerce. This dual identity was crucial to his survival and success. Historical fact: the anti-mafia efforts intensified following the 1993 bombings, with increased cooperation between law enforcement agencies and stricter legislation. However, the Graviano brothers' network was resilient, adapting swiftly to the heightened pressure. Giuseppe's skill in blending legitimate business with illicit activities helped shield the family from many investigations. Many people still think mafia leaders are simple criminals. Giuseppe's story uncovers a man who was as much a strategist as a criminal. So what do you think? Imagine now the eerie silence after the explosion, the city holding its breath, and the invisible web of power continuing to tighten its grip. Giuseppe's world is one where silence is the loudest voice. Lean back, let the stillness envelop you, and follow the footsteps of the man who mastered the art of speaking without words. The aftermath of the bombings leaves Palermo and much of Italy in a state of shock and turmoil. Yet Giuseppe Graviano moves through this chaos with an unnerving calm. While the city reels from the destruction, he operates behind a veil of silence, orchestrating his empire with the precision of a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. In this world, noise is a liability. Control is maintained in the quiet. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment was a stepping stone into a world where subtlety and discretion were weapons as lethal as any bomb or bullet. Giuseppe's approach to power contrasts sharply with the stereotypical image of the boisterous gangster. He prefers to work behind the scenes, letting violence do the talking while he handles the connections, the finances, and the negotiations. This shadowy role earned him the title, the businessman of silent bombs, a testament to his methodical and strategic nature. Historical fact: the mafia's shift towards more covert operations in the 1990s was partly a response to intensified law enforcement efforts following high-profile trials and crackdowns. Giuseppe's network is built on trust, secrecy, and an intricate system of communication designed to evade detection. Couriers, coded messages, and face-to-face meetings in secluded locations replace phone calls or written correspondence, which are easily monitored. Many people still think that mafia dealings are all about open confrontation and loud threats. Giuseppe's story reveals the importance of invisibility and discretion in maintaining power. So, what do you think? Palermo's political and economic systems are subtly influenced by these silent forces. Through a web of influence stretching from local politicians to business moguls, Giuseppe ensures his operations continue unimpeded. The line between legality and criminality blurs, a murky space where the mafia's reach extends. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial commitment to the unspoken rules of this shadow world shaped a lifetime of navigating complexity and risk. Behind the facade of respectability, Giuseppe coordinates strategies that keep the family ahead of law enforcement and rivals alike. His preference for measured action over impulsive violence reflects a deep understanding of power dynamics. Historical fact: during this period, the Sicilian mafia invested heavily in legitimate businesses to launder money and strengthen their socio-political influence. Giuseppe's calm exterior masks a ruthless mind capable of calculating risks and rewards with surgical precision. This balance between patience and ruthlessness defines his reign. Many people still think that mafia bosses are reckless or impulsive. Giuseppe's calculated approach challenges this perception. So what do you think as you listen? Picture the muted conversations in shadowed rooms, the rustling of papers, and the clink of glasses masking deals that shape destinies. This is the soundscape of Giuseppe's domain. The Graviano brothers' empire thrives in the silence, their bombs loud only enough to remind the world that they remain in control without shouting it. Lean back, breathe slowly, and follow the silent footsteps of a man who mastered power through quiet command. In the dimly lit offices and hidden meeting rooms where deals are sealed with a glance rather than a handshake, Giuseppe Graviano's influence grows steadily. His ability to weave legitimate business with the dark threads of the mafia's operations transforms him into a figure both respected and feared. A businessman who rarely raises his voice, but whose decisions echo across Palermo's streets. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet beginning set the stage for a career marked by subtle dominance and strategic mastery. Giuseppe's network spans a dizzying array of contacts. Politicians eager to turn a blind eye, businessmen who profit from his patronage, and law enforcement officers compromised or intimidated into silence. This web of relationships is his fortress, shielding him from the full force of justice and allowing his silent empire to expand. Historical fact: mafia families during this era were notorious for infiltrating local government and securing public contracts, using their influence to control entire sectors of the economy. Behind the scenes, Giuseppe leverages these connections to push projects, manipulate markets, and redirect funds. His financial acumen ensures that the money flows cleanly through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. Many people still think the mafia's strength lies in muscle alone. Giuseppe's story reveals the power of money and influence, a quieter but no less deadly weapon. So, what do you think? Palermo's social fabric is complex, with many caught between admiration and fear of figures like Giuseppe. To some, he represents a protector, a provider. To others, a ruthless manipulator who enforces silence through violence. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment marked not just a step into crime, but a plunge into the murky waters of power, where every relationship is a potential weapon or shield. Communication remains a carefully guarded art. Giuseppe employs trusted messengers, encrypted language, and face-to-face meetings to orchestrate his operations without leaving a trace. This discretion frustrates law enforcement and prolongs his reign. Historical fact: the mafia's code of omertà ensures that fear and loyalty suppress any potential informants, creating an almost impenetrable veil around their activities. Giuseppe's reputation for silence and calculation makes him a difficult target. Even his closest associates know little of the full scope of his operations, a testament to his skill at compartmentalization. Many people still think mafia leaders are reckless or obvious. Giuseppe's stealth and patience demonstrate a more sophisticated approach to power. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the hush of a boardroom where whispered deals determine the fate of industries, the subtle hand guiding markets and politics alike. This is Giuseppe's true battlefield. The Graviano brothers command from the shadows, their power measured not in volume, but in reach and impact. Lean back, let your thoughts drift, and follow the silent architect shaping Palermo's destiny. The tension in Palermo's air is thick, but Giuseppe Graviano moves with an assuredness born from years of navigating treacherous waters. As law enforcement intensifies its efforts, the Graviano brothers adapt with equal vigor, shifting tactics to outpace their pursuers. Giuseppe's signature blend of subtlety and strategy becomes even more critical as the stakes rise. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet departure was the prelude to a lifetime spent balancing on the razor's edge between power and peril. The crackdown against Cosa Nostra, especially after the high-profile assassinations of judges Falcone and Borsellino, marks a turning point. Authorities deploy new investigative techniques, increase cooperation with international agencies, and target the mafia's financial networks with unprecedented vigor. Historical fact: following the 1992 assassinations, the Italian government launched Operation Clean Hands, focusing on dismantling mafia infiltration into politics and business. Giuseppe responds by tightening operational security. Communications become even more covert, with the Gravianos relying on trusted intermediaries and encrypted methods to coordinate. Legitimate businesses are further shielded, and false fronts multiply, complicating law enforcement's task. Many people still think mafia power is only maintained through violence. Giuseppe's adaptive strategies reveal a sophisticated understanding of risk management and survival. So what do you think? The brothers also face internal pressures. Rival factions seek to exploit the increased attention on the Gravianos, challenging their authority and threatening to fracture their control. Giuseppe's diplomatic skills come to the fore as he negotiates alliances and quells dissent. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment was not just a start, but a foundation for handling the complex dynamics of mafia politics. The social impact of the crackdown is profound. Palermo's citizens experience a mix of hope, fear, and skepticism as the state intensifies its fight against organized crime. Yet the mafia's roots remain deep, sustained by silence and complicity. Historical fact: the use of pentiti, informants, during this period exposes many mafia secrets, but also leads to violent reprisals and a climate of mistrust. Giuseppe's network weathers these storms by emphasizing secrecy and loyalty. His ability to maintain cohesion within the clan is a testament to his leadership. Many people still think the mafia's downfall is imminent with every crackdown. Giuseppe's resilience tells a different story, one of adaptation and persistence. So, what do you think? As you listen, imagine the careful dance of power in smoky back rooms, the subtle negotiations that prevent war and preserve influence. Giuseppe's reign is a study in control through calm and calculation. Lean back, relax, and follow the silent footsteps of a man who thrives amidst chaos by mastering the art of quiet command. The Sicilian sun casts long shadows over Palermo as 1992 unfolds into one of the bloodiest years in the island's history. The assassination of Judge Giovanni Falcone on May 23rd sends shockwaves through Italy and the world, a stark reminder of the brutal lengths Cosa Nostra will go to preserve its dominion. Behind the scenes, Giuseppe Graviano's influence looms large, his strategic mind weaving the complex web that led to this deadly strike. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial step was the seed from which this lethal chapter would grow. A lifetime spent in the shadows of calculated violence. Falcone's killing is not merely a vendetta. It is a message, a declaration of war against the Italian state's efforts to dismantle the mafia's grip. The bombing on the A29 motorway near Capaci obliterates the judge's convoy, killing Falcone, his wife, and 3 police escorts. The sophistication of the attack, from the explosive placement to the timing, indicates the involvement of high-ranking mafia strategists, with Giuseppe's name surfacing among them. Historical fact: the Capaci bombing was orchestrated by the mafia to eliminate one of their most relentless prosecutors and to intimidate the Italian judiciary. The Graviano brothers understood the symbolic weight of such an assassination. It was not only about eliminating an enemy, but about instilling fear throughout the state's institutions and the public. Many people still think mafia violence is spontaneous and disorganized. The Capaci bombing reveals a chilling level of coordination and long-term planning. So what do you think? Palermo reels in the aftermath. Citizens are torn between grief and the suffocating presence of a criminal power that seems untouchable. Giuseppe, ever the silent architect, watches as his influence swells amid the chaos. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment was the foundation of a career where each move is measured against its ripple effects. Behind closed doors, the Graviano brothers recalibrate. They navigate the rising tide of law enforcement pressure, political backlash, and internal mafia rivalries with deft precision. Giuseppe's role extends beyond violence. He becomes a key player in maintaining the fragile balance within Cosa Nostra. Historical fact: following Falcone's murder, Italy intensifies its anti-mafia legislation, leading to mass arrests and the eventual downfall of many high-ranking mafiosi. Despite the pressure, Giuseppe's ability to blend legitimate business with underworld dealings provides a buffer against the tightening noose. His network remains resilient, adapting to new threats with agility. Many people still think that mafia leaders crumble under pressure. Giuseppe's persistence shows a different reality, one of adaptation and survival. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the slow, calculated moves behind the scenes, the silent meetings where destinies are decided, and the heavy cost of power in a city caught between light and shadow. Lean back, breathe deeply, and follow the footsteps of the man whose silence echoed louder than any gunshot. The ripples from Judge Falcone's assassination spread far beyond Palermo's borders, shaking the very foundations of Italy's fight against organized crime. Yet, even amidst the rising storm, Giuseppe Graviano moves with deliberate calm, navigating the turbulent waters with a steady hand. The Graviano brothers' grip on Cosa Nostra remains unshaken, though the pressure from law enforcement and rival factions intensifies. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet step forward was the first in a lifetime of maneuvering through perilous power plays. The brutal killing of Falcone, followed by that of Paolo Borsellino just months later, marks a turning point in mafia-state relations. The state doubles down on its efforts, employing new tactics, increasing international cooperation, and cracking down harder on the mafia's financial networks. Historical fact: the establishment of the Direzione Investigativa Antimafia, DIA, and the use of pentiti, turncoat informants, revolutionized the fight against the mafia during this period. Giuseppe's response is multifaceted. On one front, he tightens operational security, ensuring that communication channels are sealed and trusted allies are few but fiercely loyal. On another, he uses his business and political contacts to mitigate the impact of arrests and investigations. Many people still think mafia power hinges solely on violence. Giuseppe's strategic blending of influence, money, and loyalty reveals a more complex reality. So what do you think? Inside the mafia, tensions simmer. The pressure brings old rivalries to the surface, testing the Graviano brothers' ability to maintain unity and control. Giuseppe's diplomatic skills are as crucial as his ruthlessness in these moments. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial journey prepared him for the delicate balancing act of leadership within a fractured and dangerous organization. Palermo's citizens live in the shadow of these events, some clinging to hope that justice will prevail, others resigned to the mafia's persistent presence. The silence that once protected the Gravianos begins to crack under the weight of informants and investigations. Historical fact: Several high-profile mafia trials during this period led to significant convictions, but also exposed the syndicate to internal vulnerabilities. Giuseppe's mastery of compartmentalization and secrecy helps insulate him from many of these threats. Yet the cracks in the organization's facade begin to show, hinting at the eventual unraveling to come. Many people still think mafia families operate as monolithic blocks. Giuseppe's experience reveals a network fraught with internal conflict and constant negotiation. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the tension in hidden rooms, the whispered accusations, and the fragile alliances that keep a criminal empire intact. Lean back, relax your mind, and follow the calculated footsteps of a man who walks the razor's edge between power and peril. Giuseppe Graviano's world is one of codes, not just the literal kind whispered in dark corners, but the subtle, unspoken languages that govern loyalty, secrecy, and survival within Cosa Nostra. These mysterious codes form the backbone of his operations, ensuring that every message, every instruction, passes through veils of silence and encryption, making detection by authorities a near impossible task. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That early step was not just about money, but about learning how to speak the language of shadows, a dialect where silence is louder than words. Within the mafia, communication is never casual. Every gesture, every glance, every coded phrase carries weight. Giuseppe understands that breaking this code is a death sentence, not just for the messenger, but for entire networks. Historical fact: the mafia's use of secret codes, ciphers, and couriers has been documented for centuries, designed to protect the organization from infiltration and prosecution. Giuseppe's mastery of these communication methods allows him to coordinate complex operations, from bombings to money laundering, while keeping his identity and intent cloaked in mystery. Many people still think that mafia communications are easy to intercept or understand. Giuseppe's story reveals the sophisticated layers of secrecy that protect the syndicate. So what do you think? This reliance on codes fosters a culture of distrust and paranoia. Even within trusted circles, suspicion lingers. Giuseppe maintains strict control over who knows what, limiting information to a need-to-know basis. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That day marked the beginning of a lifelong education in secrecy and trust, delicate threads that must never unravel. Palermo's law enforcement agencies struggle to penetrate these veils. Despite advances in technology and informant testimonies, the codes remain a formidable barrier. Historical fact: despite the use of pentiti, many mafia communications remain indecipherable due to complex ciphers and strict operational security. Giuseppe's ability to adapt to evolving law enforcement tactics keeps his operations resilient. His insistence on secrecy not only protects his family, but also perpetuates the mafia's myth of invulnerability. Many people still think breaking the mafia's communication is just a matter of luck or technology. Giuseppe's experience shows that it's also about discipline, culture, and unyielding vigilance. So what do you think as you listen? Imagine the silent exchanges in shadowed rooms, the passing of folded notes, the subtle nods that convey entire plans without a word. Lean back. Let the silence envelop you, and follow the quiet footsteps of a man who speaks volumes without ever raising his voice. Arrests ripple through the Sicilian underworld like distant thunder, shaking the foundations of the Graviano Empire, but failing to bring it crashing down. Giuseppe Graviano's world is one of survival, and survival means adapting swiftly when the walls close in. As police raids multiply and allies are taken into custody, He maneuvers through this new terrain with a blend of caution and audacity. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet departure was the seed from which a lifetime of calculated risk and evasive action would grow. The early 1990s see a surge in arrests of high-ranking mafia figures, many a direct result of the anti-mafia campaigns fueled by informants and judicial determination. Yet Giuseppe eludes capture thanks to a combination of careful planning, loyal protectors, and the elusive nature of his operations. Historical fact: the Italian state's crackdown in this era led to the capture of dozens of mafiosi, yet some like Giuseppe managed to avoid immediate arrest, maintaining their influence from the shadows. Each arrest sends shockwaves through the criminal network, triggering shifts in alliances and power struggles. Giuseppe's role extends beyond evading law enforcement. He becomes a stabilizing force, managing the fallout and keeping fractured factions in line. Many people still think that arrests mean the end of mafia leaders. Giuseppe's story shows resilience and the ability to maintain power even behind prison walls or in hiding. So what do you think? As Palermo's streets grow tense with uncertainty, Giuseppe doubles down on secrecy. He compartmentalizes information, limits communication, and uses trusted intermediaries to shield himself and his family. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment laid the foundation for mastering this game of cat and mouse, where silence is both shield and sword. Despite increasing pressure, Giuseppe's network adapts. The business fronts continue operating. The lines between legal and illegal blur further, and his influence reaches into new territories. Historical fact: many mafia leaders have historically maintained control from prison through intermediaries and coded messages, demonstrating the durability of their networks. Giuseppe's ability to command loyalty from within and outside prison walls underscores his strategic genius. His calculated responses to arrests demonstrate a deep understanding of organizational survival. Many people still think prison ends a gangster's career. Giuseppe's experience tells a different story, one of enduring influence and strategic resilience. So what do you think? Imagine now the quiet corridors of a prison, the coded messages passing through guarded channels, the careful orchestration of power that transcends physical walls. Lean back, relax, and follow the unseen paths of a man who thrives in both freedom and captivity. The air inside the prison is heavy, a mixture of stale breath and the unspoken weight of countless stories trapped within these cold stone walls. For Giuseppe Graviano, incarceration is not the end, but another stage in his silent reign. Behind these barriers, the chessboard shifts subtly. Pawns become kings, and kings learn to move unseen. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet beginning now seems distant, yet the lessons learned echo louder than ever, guiding him through confinement with the same calculated calm. Life behind bars is a world unto itself, ruled by codes and alliances as strict and dangerous as those outside. Giuseppe's experience here is one of constant negotiation with guards, inmates, and unseen enemies, a balancing act of power and survival. Historical fact: Italian prisons housing mafia members have been known to become hubs of continued criminal activity, with leaders maintaining influence despite their confinement. Yet inside this restricted world, a new kind of silence settles, less about control and more about reflection. The noise of the outside world dims, replaced by the slow ticking of time and the quiet hum of distant footsteps. Many people still think prison breaks spirits. Giuseppe's story reveals a different truth, one of endurance and mental fortitude. So what do you think? The Graviano family outside continues the fight, carrying on operations with the resilience of those determined to keep their legacy alive. Giuseppe's influence remains a guiding force, a silent echo reaching beyond the prison walls. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? Each step forward, no matter how constrained, is part of a larger journey, a testament to the power of patience and perseverance. As you listen now, allow your thoughts to slow, the words softening into a gentle murmur. Imagine the fading light through barred windows, the stillness wrapping around you like a soothing blanket. The path ahead is uncertain, but Giuseppe's story is one of quiet strength, a reminder that even in darkness, the human spirit can find ways to endure. Let the calm settle in, the tension ease, and the night carry you toward peace. Behind the cold steel bars and heavy walls, Giuseppe Graviano faces a world starkly different from the bustling streets of Palermo. Yet, within this confinement, the battle for power continues, silent but fierce. Life in prison tests not just the body, but the mind and spirit. And Giuseppe's journey through these challenges reveals the resilience that has become his hallmark. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet departure now seems like a distant echo, yet its lessons carry him through each day behind bars. The prison environment is a microcosm of the mafia's larger world. Hierarchies, alliances, and rivalries play out in whispered conversations and careful glances. Giuseppe must navigate this landscape with the same strategic mind that guided his rise outside. Historical fact: many mafia leaders have maintained influence from prison, using coded messages and trusted intermediaries to continue their operations. Giuseppe's incarceration forces a recalibration of his methods. Direct control gives way to delegation, and power is exercised through trusted proxies. This distance challenges his ability to command, but also sharpens his patience and foresight. Many people still think prison breaks leaders. Giuseppe's story illustrates the complex dynamics of maintaining authority even when physically confined. So what do you think? Meanwhile, the outside world is shifting. New players emerge, old alliances fray, and the fight for control intensifies. Giuseppe's presence remains felt, a shadow guiding the actions of those loyal to him. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial step prepared him for a lifetime of adaptation and survival. Lessons crucial now more than ever. As you listen, imagine the quiet intensity of a mind working behind walls. The slow passage of days marked by reflection and strategy. Lean back, breathe deeply, and follow the silent strength of a man whose influence transcends confinement. The prison walls may confine Giuseppe Graviano's body, but his influence within the shifting landscape of Cosa Nostra continues to resonate powerfully beyond those barriers. The changing mafia landscape of the mid-1990s is a turbulent sea of emerging factions, fractured alliances, and new opportunities. A world that Giuseppe navigates with the same quiet mastery he displayed before his incarceration. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet first step now echoes through a journey marked by adaptation and strategic endurance. As law enforcement pressure intensifies and new leaders rise to fill vacuums, the old guard must recalibrate. Giuseppe's enduring presence serves as both a stabilizing force and a symbol of resilience, reminding loyalists of the importance of patience and calculated moves. Historical fact: the mid-1990s saw the rise of younger mafia factions who challenged traditional hierarchies, leading to internal conflicts and shifts in power dynamics. Giuseppe's ability to maintain influence from behind bars is testament to his strategic foresight and the loyalty he commands. His network employs trusted intermediaries to communicate orders, ensuring continuity amid upheaval. Many people still think mafia leadership ends with arrest. Giuseppe's story defies that notion, illustrating how power can persist and even evolve under constraint. So what do you think? Outside prison walls, the Graviano brothers' legacy continues, their names still commanding respect and fear. Yet, the landscape is more fractured, requiring careful navigation to maintain control. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? The lessons of that departure, discretion, loyalty, strategy, remain essential in this new era. As you listen, picture the shifting sands of Palermo's underworld, where new alliances are forged and old ones tested. Lean back, relax, and follow the measured footsteps of a man who endures by adapting. Giuseppe Graviano's influence stretches beyond prison walls, weaving through the complex web of alliances and rivalries that define the mafia's ever-evolving landscape. New alliances emerge, some forged in necessity, others born from opportunity. Navigating these shifting currents requires the keen strategic mind Giuseppe has honed since his earliest days in Palermo's shadows. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That unassuming moment was the seed of a lifelong ability to read the tides of power and move accordingly. In the mid-1990s, as old mafia bosses faced incarceration or death, younger figures seized the moment to assert themselves. Giuseppe's network had to balance maintaining legacy influence with accommodating fresh players eager to carve their own paths. Historical fact: the 1990s saw the rise of new mafia factions across Sicily and Italy, resulting in both cooperation and violent clashes as power was contested. Giuseppe's approach was to act as a mediator, leveraging his established reputation to broker deals and prevent outright war. His ability to maintain cohesion among diverse groups exemplified his leadership and strategic finesse. Many people still think mafia power is maintained only through violence. Giuseppe's diplomacy and negotiation skills reveal a more nuanced picture. So what do you think? These alliances were delicate. Trust was scarce, and betrayal a constant threat. Giuseppe's cautious navigation through this terrain was vital in preserving his family's influence and preventing fragmentation. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That early lesson in loyalty and caution remained a guiding principle through these turbulent times. Meanwhile, Palermo's social and political environment continued to fluctuate, with ongoing crackdowns and public outcry against mafia influence. Giuseppe's ability to adapt ensured his clan's survival amid increasing pressure. Historical fact: law enforcement's use of pentiti and enhanced surveillance challenged the mafia's secrecy, but also led to new tactics and structural adaptations within the organization. Many people still think mafia families are rigid and unchanging. Giuseppe's experience shows they are dynamic, constantly evolving to survive. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the intricate dance of alliance and rivalry, the whispered negotiations, and the ever-present undercurrent of danger that defines Giuseppe's world. Lean back, let the complexity wash over you, and follow the careful footsteps of a man who thrives in uncertainty. The long shadow of 1994 stretches across Palermo and beyond, a year marked by upheaval, violence, and transformation. For Giuseppe Graviano, this period represents both a zenith and a crucible, a test of his leadership, strategy, and survival instincts in a world where loyalties shift like desert sands. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That small, silent step now echoes across a decade defined by turbulence and calculated moves. In the aftermath of the bombings and assassinations, the Italian government intensified its efforts, launching sweeping operations against Cosa Nostra. Giuseppe's network faced relentless scrutiny, forcing adaptations that reshaped the organization's structure and tactics. Historical fact: the 1990s saw the Italian state implement comprehensive anti-mafia laws and increased cooperation with international agencies, leading to significant arrests, but also driving the mafia further underground. Giuseppe's resilience during this period is emblematic of his ability to evolve. He embraced new methods of communication, expanded his legitimate business fronts, and strengthened alliances to weather the storm. Many people still think that mafia figures crumble under such pressure. Giuseppe's experience proves otherwise, highlighting a capacity for endurance and reinvention. So, what do you think? Palermo's streets bear the scars of these battles, physically, socially, and psychologically. The community grapples with fear, hope, and the desire for normalcy amid the ongoing struggle. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That moment laid the foundation for navigating the shifting tides that followed. Behind the scenes, Giuseppe's influence persists, a steady current beneath the surface chaos. His strategic foresight ensures that his family's legacy endures despite external pressures. Historical fact: the fragmentation of Cosa Nostra during this time led to increased violence internally as factions vied for dominance. Many people still think of the mafia as a monolith. Giuseppe's story reveals a complex, fractured, and adaptive organization. So, what do you think? As you listen, envision the slow turning of wheels in shadowed chambers, the whispered plans that shape destinies, and the quiet endurance of a man who commands respect without spectacle. Lean back, relax, and follow the enduring footsteps of the businessman behind the silent bombs. The courtroom becomes a new battleground where Giuseppe Graviano's influence and legacy are tested not by bullets or bombs, but by legal maneuvers, testimonies, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Trials expose secrets long guarded in silence, threatening to unravel the intricate web he has woven over decades. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That silent start echoes now in the corridors of justice, where words replace weapons, but the stakes remain just as high. The Italian judicial system faces enormous challenges in prosecuting mafia figures, as evidence is scarce, witnesses fearful, and the code of omertà stubbornly intact. Giuseppe's lawyers and loyal allies deploy every tactic to protect him, while prosecutors work tirelessly to pierce the veil. Historical fact: the 1990s and early 2000s saw some of Italy's most significant mafia trials, with a mix of convictions and acquittals, revealing the difficulties of dismantling organized crime through legal means alone. Despite the intense scrutiny, Giuseppe maintains a stoic presence, relying on a carefully crafted image and the loyalty of those who continue to shield him. The courtroom dramas become part of the larger power struggle within the mafia and the state. Many people still think trials spell the end for mafia bosses. Giuseppe's story highlights the complexities and resilience within this ongoing conflict. So what do you think? Palermo watches closely as justice unfolds, hoping for closure, but aware of the deep-rooted challenges. The trials become a public stage where silence and revelation clash, and the true nature of power is contested. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet beginning now resonates through the echoes of testimonies and verdicts. Behind the scenes, Giuseppe's influence persists, adapting to new realities while maintaining the codes that have safeguarded him for years. Historical fact: many mafia convictions during this era were secured through the courageous testimonies of pentiti, though the threat of retaliation loomed large. Many people still think that legal pressure is sufficient to end mafia reigns. Giuseppe's experience shows that the struggle is far from over. So what do you think? As you listen, picture the solemn faces in courtrooms, the hushed conversations in prison visiting rooms, and the invisible battles fought with words and wills. Lean back, let the tension ease, and follow the measured steps of a man who navigates power in all its forms. The glare of the media spotlight falls sharply on Giuseppe Graviano and the tangled web of Cosa Nostra he helped weave. Public perception, often shaped by headlines and sensational stories, becomes another battlefield, one where image and narrative influence power as much as any bomb or threat. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet moment set into motion a story that the world would try to unravel, piece by piece. Giuseppe's public persona is carefully managed, a blend of respectable businessman and elusive figure. While prosecutors and journalists paint him as a ruthless crime boss, his supporters view him as a protector and a symbol of tradition. This duality complicates the narrative, making truth slippery. Historical fact: throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Italian media played a significant role in exposing mafia activities, but also faced criticism for sensationalism and occasionally glamorizing criminals. Giuseppe understands the power of image and uses it to his advantage, cultivating contacts within media circles and shaping his story through silence and select appearances. Many people still think mafia figures are universally feared and reviled. Giuseppe's story reveals the complexities of reputation and perception in the world of organized crime. So, what do you think? The media's gaze also puts pressure on law enforcement and judicial bodies, influencing public opinion and political will. Giuseppe's network uses this environment to sow doubt, distract, and manipulate narratives. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That day marked the beginning of a journey where control over stories became as crucial as control over territory. Behind the headlines and broadcasts lies a game of shadows, where truth is contested and power is negotiated, not just in courtrooms, but in the court of public opinion. Historical fact: coverage of mafia trials and events often sparked national debates about corruption, justice, and societal complicity in Italy. Many people still think public opinion has little effect on organized crime. Giuseppe's experience shows the subtle influence media wields in shaping realities. So what do you think? As you listen, imagine the flashing cameras, whispered rumors, and the delicate balance between fear, fascination, and denial that colors every story. Lean back. Let the layers of narrative unfold softly, and follow the quiet footsteps of a man who commands attention without uttering a word. The courtroom dramas continue to unravel, revealing secrets and testing the mafia's ironclad code of silence. For Giuseppe Graviano, these trials are not just legal battles. They are psychological wars fought in the shadows, where every testimony, every whispered accusation, threatens to crack the fortress of loyalty that has protected him for decades. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet first step was the beginning of a journey where trust is fragile and betrayal deadly. Giuseppe's approach to the courtroom is as strategic as his moves on the streets. He relies heavily on silence, legal maneuvering, and the loyalty of associates who refuse to testify. The pressure to break the code is intense, but the consequences of betrayal remain a powerful deterrent. Historical fact: many mafia trials have been undermined by witness intimidation and the difficulty in securing reliable testimonies due to the omertà. The Graviano clan's internal discipline is tested as pentiti Informants emerge, threatening to expose secrets and dismantle long-held power structures. Giuseppe works tirelessly to manage the fallout, negotiating, intimidating, and, when necessary, punishing to maintain order. Many people still think that the mafia's silence is unbreakable. Giuseppe's story reveals cracks and challenges, but also resilience. So what do you think? Meanwhile, the Italian justice system evolves, employing new technologies and investigative techniques to penetrate the mafia's veil. Giuseppe adapts in turn, shifting tactics to stay ahead. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That day marked the start of a lifelong game of cat and mouse between law enforcement and organized crime. The courtroom becomes a theater where not only legal arguments but psychological battles play out, each side seeking to outmaneuver the other. Historical fact: the use of wiretaps, surveillance, and financial forensics has been pivotal in recent decades to build cases against mafia figures. Many people still think winning in court is straightforward. Giuseppe's experience shows it's a complex and ongoing struggle. So, what do you think? As you listen, imagine the tense silences in packed courtrooms, the hushed conversations in waiting rooms, and the weight of secrets hanging heavy in the air. Lean back, let the intensity soften, and follow the steady footsteps of a man who navigates power through silence and strategy. Many people still think that Giuseppe Graviano was a mere pawn in a larger mafia game, a figure swept along by more powerful forces beyond his control. But what do you think? Was he truly a minor player, or did his influence run deeper, his strategic mind shaping events with quiet but undeniable force? Giuseppe's life challenges the simplistic narratives often told about mafia hierarchies. While certainly part of a vast and complex organization, he carved out a role that was uniquely his own, blending business acumen, strategic planning, and ruthless determination to leave an indelible mark on the Sicilian underworld. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That unassuming moment was the foundation of a career marked by calculated risks and silent power. Within Cosa Nostra's labyrinthine structures, Giuseppe was neither the loudest nor the most violent. Instead, he was the embodiment of a new kind of leadership, one that values discretion over display, patience over haste, and influence over intimidation. Historical fact: throughout mafia history, many leaders have operated behind the scenes, preferring to pull strings rather than brandish weapons. A tradition Giuseppe continues. His role in orchestrating bombings, managing business fronts, and maintaining political connections demonstrates a level of control that belies any notion of being a mere pawn. Many people still think that mafia power is centralized in a few iconic figures. Giuseppe's story shows a distributed and sophisticated network where influence is shared and contested. So what do you think? The debate over Giuseppe's culpability and agency continues among scholars and law enforcement alike. Some argue that his actions were dictated by family loyalty and survival, while others see him as a mastermind with his own agenda. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That choice to engage in this shadowy world was the start of navigating complex loyalties and ambitions. As you listen, consider the blurred lines between victim and villain, pawn and player, in a world where survival often depends on mastering ambiguity. Lean back, let your mind ponder these questions, and follow the footsteps of a man whose silence invites reflection as much as fear. Giuseppe Graviano's final gambit unfolds in the late 1990s, a delicate dance between retreat and resurgence. With law enforcement tightening its grip and rivals circling like wolves, he maneuvers cautiously, aware that one misstep could shatter the empire he and his brothers have painstakingly built. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That quiet departure set him on a path where every move is weighed, every risk calculated with cold precision. This period sees Giuseppe balancing the need to protect his family and assets while seeking new avenues to maintain influence. His approach is less about open confrontation and more about preserving legacy through adaptability. Historical fact: many mafia figures during this era began investing in legitimate enterprises abroad, diversifying their holdings to reduce vulnerability. Giuseppe's strategy involves consolidating power within trusted circles and exploring international connections, ensuring the Graviano name remains a force even as Sicily's criminal landscape shifts. Many people still think mafia bosses cling to old ways. Giuseppe's story reveals a willingness to evolve, to play the long game beyond immediate violence. So what do you think? In this final phase, Giuseppe's moves are marked by caution, a recognition of the changing tides and the importance of survival over spectacle. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That initial step taught lessons of resilience that guide his final maneuvers. As you listen, imagine the subtle shifts in alliances, the silent negotiations, and the quiet determination that define this closing chapter. Lean back, breathe in the weight of history, and follow the footsteps of a man who played his last hand with quiet dignity. The legacy of Giuseppe Graviano is woven into the very fabric of mafia history, a testament to the power of silence, strategy, and resilience. His story closes not with a bang, but with a whisper, echoing through Palermo's alleys and the corridors of power far beyond Sicily. Do you remember the day he left with the first money? That humble beginning blossomed into a life that shaped destinies and defined an era. Giuseppe's impact transcends the violence and intrigue. It is found in the subtle shifts he orchestrated, the networks he built, the codes he upheld, and the shadowy influence he wielded. His reign exemplifies a new form of mafia leadership, one that prizes discretion and control over spectacle. Historical fact: the evolution of Cosa Nostra into a more covert and business-oriented organization during Giuseppe's time reflects broader changes in organized crime worldwide. Many people still think of mafia legends as larger-than-life figures defined by brutality. Giuseppe's legacy challenges this, highlighting the quiet, relentless work behind the scenes. So what do you think? As you listen now, imagine the city of Palermo settling into night, the streets calm but charged with the memory of countless stories of power, silence, and survival. Lean back, let the night embrace you, and follow the final footsteps of the businessman whose silent bombs forever changed the course of history. Hey everyone, thanks so much for staying with me through this deep dive into the life and legacy of Giuseppe Graviano, the businessman of silent bombs. It's a story layered with shadows, silence, and survival, reminding us how power can be wielded quietly but decisively. I hope this journey helped you see beyond the headlines and violence to the complex human story of strategy, loyalty, and resilience. Whether you're in Palermo or anywhere else in the world right now, remember that history isn't just about loud moments. Sometimes, it's the quiet footsteps that leave the deepest marks. If you enjoyed this story and want more gentle yet gripping gangster tales to wind down to, be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Don't forget to share where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world these stories are reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on that soft fan hum, and let yourself drift into peaceful sleep with these stories as your quiet companions. Remember, sometimes silence is the most powerful voice. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, rest well and sweet dreams.